There's an inner life to the soul too, compared to which that inner life is like the soul to the soul, so the soul becomes like a body. Everything has a body and a soul. Even your soul could be considered a body that has a more refined, more edel, more sensitive, more raffiné, more spiritual dimension to it. We learned that Tanya is about life, and therefore it begins with the beginning of life, how a child is born, and tells us right away, listen, my dear child, this is not going to be easy. There's going to be conflict here. Because on the one hand, you swore that you would be as good as you could be, and never to be content with what you've achieved. And even if everybody tells you how righteous you are, you're not supposed to believe them. You should be wicked in your own eyes. And then we had a problem because we learned that in the Torah itself, the Torah has a body and a soul. The physical being of the Torah is the scroll that we keep in the synagogue, the books of explanation, and the order to there's the explanation itself is like the soul of the Torah. And we learned that the Torah itself is also the blueprint for creation. That Hashem, like an architect, makes a blueprint and then follows his design and builds the building. So too, Hashem followed the design of the Torah in creating the world. He created the world with 10 sayings, right? Let there be light, let there be a division of the waters, let the waters recede into lakes and rivers and oceans, and let the land appear. And then he said, the moon and the sun and the moon and the stars in the heavens, created birds and flying things, some people say angels. And in the earth, in the oceans, he created fish and swarming things on the land and swarming things in the water, unclean things, clean things. He separated between things that are pure and clean and kosher and things that are not clean, not kosher. Everything has a purpose. And then on the fifth day, he created birds. And the sixth day, animals, and mankind, finally mankind. Seventh day, created Shabbos. This sevenfold cycle is essential to life itself. That's our creative cycle, the way we do things. And Hashem made the world with 10 utterances, by 10 things he said with speech. Therefore, we are also created. It says they created man in his image. And what does that mean with him, his image? That we have intellect. People have brains to think, to reason, and to understand the difference between good and bad, moral and immoral. And these 10 utterances are like the DNA of creation. They set a pattern that is followed in everything in the world. And then we learned that just like a person has a soul, and a person wears physical garments on his or her body, our soul also wants to have garments. We'll discuss this at great length as we go along. What are the garments that the soul desires? You want to have a good wardrobe? You want to have a beautiful wardrobe. This is a wardrobe that you're going to take with you for all eternity. And it's made up of the things that you do. So you want to have a beautiful, clean wardrobe. Not a wardrobe with rips and tears and dirt. If there is anything ripped or torn or dirty, we have to repair it. It has to be cleaned. That's called tshuva, fixing things up. And then there's the garment of speech, the things that we say. They also define what we are. And so we want to be very careful. Like when we choose a garment in the morning, we want to be careful about the garments of speech that we use. There's a parable about different organs of the body. A person had a dream, and different organs of the body were all arguing which is the most important. And the tongue said it was the most important. It said, you're the weakest. You have no bone in you. And the whole story unfolds how with a slight word, this same person got into very, very, very terrible trouble and was about to be executed. And then with the same tongue, he was able to get out of it. And all the other limbs of the body, as strong as they were and as useful as they were, the heart, the stomach, the muscles, the bones, they all had to concede that the tongue had a power that was greater than all of them. So the second garment is speech. What you can say in a few minutes can take you a lifetime to do. And the soul of the garment of speech is thought. And you can think in a split second, but will take you years and years to explain. Because each one is more internal. The word for internal is panemiut, panemius. Panemius means like the face. It's the root of the word panemius is the face. The word for face in Hebrew is panim. Panim, like we say in Yiddish, ashena panim. He has a beautiful child, ashena panim. It's a beautiful face. And it's connected with panemius, with the soul, because from a person's face, you get a hint of what they're like on the inside. You know, I'm sure you've all had the experience. You walk down the street and there's somebody walking ahead of you, and you really don't know if they're young or they're old, if they're white or they're black or yellow, if they're very comely, if their features harmonize in a beautiful way together, or the opposite. If they're older, if they've been through a great deal of sorrow, or if they're cruel people, it will show in the creases and the marks on their face and their expression. And the opposite, if they're very kind, see right away a kindly person, a certain shine, certain beauty from their face. The first time I saw the Rebbe, it was like a bright light. He was talking to hundreds and hundreds of Hasidim, and I came in the back door of 770, the driveway there in the front of 770, and a friend of mine was standing on a bacher, a young boy, a student, who I knew from where I'd been living overseas. He was standing right on the end of the bench. He saw me, he said, "Here, come up here." I came up, and there was the Rebbe, and like I said, it was like, everything else looked dark. And he turned to me and he said, say a Shechianu. Shechianu is the blessing, and thank God who kept us alive and sustained us and brought us to this moment. When you see the face, you get to see what's going on the inside. Some people, it's called physiognomy. Some people are very good at telling a person's character from their facial features, but sometimes they can be deceiving as well. There's a guy who sits on the corner of Kingston Avenue in front of the bakery the last few days. He looks like a tough character, like a murderer. One day I walked by, I said, "Good morning." And he replied to me in such a nice way. So you see, just the look on his face was deceiving. Looks can be deceiving. Okay, we learned all this. Now, having learned that no matter what people tell us, as hard as we try to have a nice wardrobe of good thoughts and good words and good deeds, we shouldn't believe people if they tell us that we're righteous. And then we have a contradiction to this. Excuse me. The contradiction comes from the Mishnah. What is the Mishnah? The word Mishnah is from the word Shnayim, which means two. Echad, Shnayim. 1, 2. Shalosh is 3. So Mishnah is rooted on the word Shnayim, Mishnah. It means it's the second version, or the second, well, I used the expression before, the viceroy, like the assistant monarch. So if the Torah is a king, the Mishnah is like a queen. The oral Torah is the queen. Or we explain this in terms of general and detail. There are general rules, principles, but then there are the details. How does this principle work? How far is its extent? What are its limitations? What is its power? These are all the details. So we have mitzvahs, 613 principles. These are the mitzvahs. And then we have an endless amount of details. The details are all in the oral Torah. And the oral Torah was given together with the written Torah. They have the same force in general. But if there's a conflict, the written Torah will rule. The oral Torah will explain, the written Torah will rule if there's any conflict. And here comes the conflict from the Mishnah in the teaching of the fathers, and we explain why they're called fathers, because they're the fathers of all wisdom, of the whole world. The wisdom of all the philosophies is to be found in these teachings of the fathers. They are the fathers of the fathers. They are the first and most important teachers who transmitted the greatest wisdom that was conveyed to mankind. And there it says, a person is never allowed. You'll say, oh, anybody knows that. Sure you do. Things that become common knowledge are also Torah. Anybody knows if you're not happy on the job, you're not going to do a good job. So it says in the Ethics of the Fathers, there in the 2nd chapter, one of the great sages of all time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you've never heard his name, this won't be the last time. He was the leader of the Jewish people, spiritual leader of the Jewish people 2,000 years ago. A great, brilliant genius, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he can. The Romans were killing all the sages. They wanted to destroy Judaism and destroy the Jewish people. So they're trying to destroy the soul of the Jewish people. Kill the soul. If you kill the body, maybe somebody else will continue. You have to kill the soul. The communists tried to do the same thing. They made Jewish education illegal. So we have a generation of Jews came out of Russia recently, the last 50, 60, 80 years, who know zero. They weren't allowed, they were so intimidated, they were persecuted. If they tried to keep Judaism, they were killed. or sent to a place where they would not survive. Siberia. Can you imagine being sent to Siberia with no clothing, no place to stay? I read a memoir of a person who survived 7 years in Siberia, sleeping in a tree trunk. And when he saw the big people, the big strong people collapsing and dying, so what did he do? He set aside some of the meager rations that they gave him. He didn't consume the whole thing. He shared with others so that they would survive. And Hashem paid him back. He survived all that time, even eating less than the others. I read in a memoir once, I was doing some research about I needed visual research about Siberia, what it was like there in the work camps. And they showed people who were intellectual people were sent there and forced to do physical labor, building roads in the wilderness, in the frozen wilderness. And they wrote there that with the cold and no place to stay and minimal food, a month, and the hard labor, very hard labor. They had to work from like 6 o'clock in the morning till dark. So hard work. They were exhausted. A month was all it took to break a person, and he couldn't survive. 1 month would do it. So he says, I want to tell you a story. I used to drive a car. I had this car. It was a Volvo. There was only one place in Brooklyn that would service a Volvo. It was owned by a Jewish guy and an Italian partner. One time they were working on my car, and so I had to hang around. So I went out. The Italian was working outside. He was putting together he was working on a vehicle. He was putting the tires on. They have kind of a drill that screws the bolts attached to the wheel to the car, and it makes a lot of noise, like that. It makes a lot of noise. I said to him, "You look like you really enjoy what you're doing." He says, "I love what I'm doing." When I was a kid, growing up in Italy, all my friends wanted to play soccer. I wanted to go to the shop and watch the men working on the cars. This is love since he was a kid. And then he turned to me and he said, if you don't love what you're doing, it's not good. It's not good for you. You get sick. It's not good for your boss because you're not going to do good work. It's not good for anybody. I said it was worthwhile for me to come today just to hear those words. And that's what it tells us here in the Mishnah. Don't be wicked in your own eyes. Because if you're not going to love yourself and the work that you're doing, it's not going to be good work. You're going to be depressed. So this is the problem. How can I promised I would be righteous, and I'm never allowed to be, and I have to think that I'm wicked, but I'm not allowed to think that I'm wicked because then I'm going to be depressed. I'm not going to do a good job. So then now we're ready to proceed. We have to turn the page. To page 34. 35. We've actually covered page 34. 35, in the middle. To understand all this, we have to understand something. Now, what I wanted to compare this to was also, when you see a building going up, you see in the end, you see what the building is. When the building is going up, you don't know really what it's all about. Because there's so much going into it, you don't know how all the pieces are going to fit together. When we're learning on this level, we have general ideas about what being Jewish is all about. That's like seeing the building. We say that everything has a soul. Body has a soul. Building also has a soul. What's the soul in the building? Part of it is the purpose of the building. That's the idea behind it. Who is it going to serve? Is it for kindergarten? Is it a hospital? Is it a school? Is it a factory? Is it a synagogue? What is it? That's going to inform all the details are going to fit that general idea. And then we're going to have to analyze the structure of the building. I remember I studied architecture at one point. So I learned there that when an architect builds a building, he indicates on the outside what's inside the building. In other words, he'll have some kind of layer indicating this is the top of the first floor. Or if they're columns, the columns will rise so high, and then there'll be a fancy top at the column, connecting the column with the building in a nice way, in a beautiful way. Or then you'll have a set of windows here, and then you'll have some kind of division, and another set of windows, and a division. And these divisions will be marked by architectural tricks or designs, but they reveal to the eye of a looker who may not even realize that he's looking at it, but they will reveal what's going on inside, how many floors there are, and how many, you might take a guess how many rooms there are. That's the physical structure. But then there's more. There's the guts, so to speak, of the building, the electricity, the wiring, the plumbing. Does the plumbing work? How does water come in? How does water go out? That's getting into, if someone would reveal that to you, an unskilled person wouldn't know what he was looking at, or what it's all about, or what are the details, what are the parts, the pieces that are necessary, the pipes, and the connections, and the wires, and the circuit breakers, and the switches. They're all necessary to make the building workable. Well, when we're learning Torah, we have the Chumash, which is the stories of our people, and the holidays, and the general rules. But when we get into the details, we're going to see general structures like floors. There are 3 festivals a year connected with agriculture: Tishrei in the spring, Pesach, and Shavuos, the 3 general festivals, the pilgrim festivals, when everybody would go to Jerusalem and bring their offerings. And then we have the wiring and the plumbing. And to understand that, first of all, we have to be aware of it. But to get to understand it, now we're looking into a deeper level. Not just its meanings, not just its lessons, but the actual wiring, what's going on. That's Kabbalah. That's what Kabbalah is all about. And since all of this is designed by the architect, when we look at the general building, that tells us what the architect has in mind. When we see the general details, that also tells us how he was organizing his thoughts. And when we look at the detailed laws, that's like looking at the functional systems of the building. And when we learn Kabbalah, that's like looking at the wiring and the piping and all the nitty-gritty details. Okay, so now to understand this problem, we have a problem. We're supposed to be righteous. We're not supposed to think that we're righteous. We're supposed to always, think we could do better. And then we're told we have to serve Hashem with joy. The base of Mikdash was destroyed because the Jews didn't serve Hashem with joy and full heart. And how can these 2 things work together? They're opposites. Don't be wicked in your eyes. Don't be wicked in your eyes. They're contradictions. So to understand this, turn to page 35. In the Gemara, in the Talmud, in Brachas, the first section of the Talmud, about saying blessings, there are 5 types of people. Righteous people, first of all, they divide into 2. Righteous people and not righteous people. And the 2 divide into 4, because in righteous people, everything has a body and a soul. So you have more righteous people and less righteous people. And that's called in the Talmud a righteous person who has good and a righteous person who doesn't have good. What does that mean? So one suggestion of the sages is that there are righteous people who suffer. And there are other righteous people who don't suffer. Not suffering is good. Suffering is not good. You have righteous who are good and righteous who are not good. Then we have the other side of the coin. We have wicked people, not good people. And there too, we have not good people who have good, and not good people who really have bad. So that's 4 different categories that a person could fit into. What am I in my life? Am I a righteous person? Could I be a righteous person? Am I a bad person? I don't think I'm that bad. I'm not great, but I'm not that bad. Where do I fit? And then you've got a middle category in the middle. Right, left, middle. And the middle guy, we said this last day is a Beinoni. He's the average person. So who is this average person? This book is for the average person. The Alter Rebbe wrote another book. He wrote a lot, but he wrote another book called the Book of the Righteous. Those are just good people. But it was so high, it burned. I guess it was a fire came down from heaven. It was too high for the world. So we're going to have to understand, what is this all about? So we have another explanation at the bottom of page 35, that the righteous person who has good is completely righteous, totally righteous. Absolutely nothing. There's not even a stain on his garments, any of the garments of his thought, speech, or action. A Torah scholar is not allowed to go around with garments that are not clean, that are stained. So his spiritual garments have not a single stain on them. And then that's the righteous person who has good. And what's the righteous person who doesn't have good? That is suggested here is a righteous person, but he's not completely righteous. Can you tell the difference between a righteous person who's completely righteous and one who's not completely righteous? How can you know? Hashem knows. We can't know. But Hashem knows. Hashem knows what's in our heart. Hashem knows what's in our mind. We can do all kinds of good things, but in our mind, we're not there. We're going through the motions. And we become very, very good at it. Like these gymnasts who were in the Olympics, who could do so many wonderful, extraordinary tricks. And now, we can understand that it's going to be the same on the other side. There are wicked people who are totally terrible, wicked people. There's no bad thing that they won't do. I mean, what's the worst thing a person could do in the world? Spiritually, to worship an idol. Here, God is giving us life and everything, and we say there is no God. I'm going to worship coffee. I love coffee. Is that foolish? I don't care what happens, just give me my cup of coffee. We read in the Parsha this week, it speaks about people who have idols, wood and stone. They leave them outside on the front yard even, because they don't care. They don't think anybody's going to steal it anyway. But they have precious idols with gold and jewelry. They keep them inside because they're afraid that they might get stolen. What kind of a God could get stolen? It was just made last week. It's still new. So foolish. And you call it God? You worship it? That's why it's called an abomination. How do you say in Spanish, abomination? Abomination. Same word? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Abomination, something disgusting, loathsome. It's like a dead rat. Someone will leave a dead rat on your doorstep. Oh, how disgusting, horrible. That's what idol worship is. And they did disgusting things. So that's a totally bad thing. What about a person who's not so totally bad? Well, here we've got a million levels. A million levels. You have people who do bad things a lot, and people who do bad things a little. People who do bad things often, people who do bad things very seldom. Very seldom. Does a righteous person ever do a bad thing? No, then he's not a righteous person. So it sort of gets narrowed down that the righteous person never does a bad thing, never. Completely righteous person is a total master of himself. And the incomplete righteous person is not yet a master of himself through and through, inside and outside. And so what's the Bain? And he's somewhere in between there. He's not righteous, because then he'd be righteous. He's not righteous, but he's not wicked either. So we're going to find out, how is it a person can be not righteous and not wicked? It's a war. You thought it was going to be a lot of fun coming to Machol Yadus and finding out about Judaism and so on, and it is, but you didn't think that you're going to have to fight a war. But once you're here, there's no turning back, because you learn the truth. Thank you very much, everybody. A blessing after we imbibe. What? Thanks to you. Gracias a Dios. I went to the yeshiva on Friday. They give out food to the poor people. They give out, hundreds of people come to get food from the city. They give it out. And so I said good morning to one of the people there. And she said, gracias a Dios, gracias a Dios. Everything is gracias a Dios. Right, Vivka? You understand? A little that much Spanish, you know. Okay, we have to say gracias a Dios. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I feel like if you want to come to me,
because I feel like a rejection. Oh no. I did.